Yeah, it's on. Technology's wonderful when it works. It's a pain when it doesn't. My message today is conflict in 1 Corinthians 13. And conflict is one of those interesting words. We can interpret it as a discussion about what we're going to have for supper, or it can go all the way to the Korean conflict, which cost thousands upon thousands of lives. And I would suggest that every one of us knows what it is to experience conflict of one type or another. And that leaves us with the question of just how do I deal with conflict? And this message came out of a Spring Body workshop down in Earlham earlier this year by Chris Vitale. I'm sure I am butchering his name. He was a guest speaker at Spring Body. And I only got to hear his Friday evening service, but he made a comment that just struck me. And he says, what if we applied 1 Corinthians 13 to conflict? And I thought, what an amazing idea. So we're going to look at that just a little bit here this morning and see if maybe 1 Corinthians 13 can help us decide how to deal with conflict. And I think we start with 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 13. And it reads, as you've probably all heard many times, if I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and I deliver up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in the wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, and I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been known fully. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. I have probably heard 100 sermons on 1 Corinthians 13. And I'll be honest with you, I've been reluctant to do one on 1 Corinthians 13 because I kind of thought well, it's been covered a lot. And it's been covered well by many, many good pastors. But when I considered this in the context of conflict, it really caused me to ask myself, what would that look like? To apply 1 Corinthians 13 to conflict. So let's break down that 1 Corinthians 13 piece by piece and apply it to conflict and see what it tells us. The first thing 1 Corinthians 13 tells me that I can be gifted in many numerous ways. But if I don't have love, I'm nothing. I'm simply making noise. And I think you'd have to agree with me that there's a lot of noise in the church today. Have we lost our love? Is there perhaps why there is so much conflict in the church? Without love, the Bible tells me, I gain nothing. So how do I love in conflict? Well, let's start off with the first attributes, patience and kindness. Am I really patient with those who I feel I should be? To be honest with you, I struggle with patience sometimes. I was working on my lawnmower yesterday and it wasn't going well. And I don't do well with mechanical things because I don't have patience with mechanical. I can have patience with human beings because they're supposed to be broken. I understand them. But mechanical things, if I turned the key last week and it worked, I should turn the key this week and it should work. Problem is, it never works that way. And I find it interesting that Paul, the writer of 1 Corinthians 13, is telling us to be patient. And yet, just 10 chapters earlier, he's also sharing his frustration with the Corinthians, that they weren't where they should be, that they should be eating milk or meat, but they're still drinking milk. And so I hear a little bit of impatience in Paul, which suggests to me that perhaps we all struggle with impatience. And I think perhaps it's easier for me to grant patience to someone else when I realize how much patience someone else needs to have with me. There are times when kindness and patience can make the difference. And kindness does kind of go in hand with patience. You know, the truth of it is, when someone differs with me, it's easier to get into that confrontational mode. I have been told, especially when I was younger, that I love to argue. Now, I always considered it debating, but I've had friends who told me it sounds a lot like arguing, and I'd always debate them about that point. The truth of it is, kindness will oftentimes require us to be patient. And it'll also require us to give a different response to those who differ from us. You know, the truth of it is, you get two people together and you will form two different opinions. You will always have potential for conflict, whether it's so simple as what are we having for supper, to theology, to ideology, to always the favorite is the politics. We can find many, many, many ways to argue. But what if we applied patience and kindness to those arguments? What would change if when I had discussions, when they differ with me, that I focused on patience and kindness instead of getting them to understand that I'm right? And I think that's kind of one of those things that has to be developed like a muscle, because it doesn't come naturally to me, and I suspect, from what I've talked to many people, that it doesn't come natural to anybody. It's a point that we have to struggle to be kind and patient. The next step involves envy and boasting, which I find a strange combination. However, in relationship to others, perhaps not, because they're both attributes of me comparing my walk with your walk. And we're not supposed to do that. But I would have to tell you, I find myself in that trap many times. I should always be encouraging others to grow in their walk. But there is a point where it can slip into boasting and envy when I am talking to them about their walk with Christ. The one thing I love about the Friends is that we're all called to come before God individually. That we're all called to have a clear conscience before God and the Holy Spirit individually. That it's not my job to tell you, nor your job to tell me how I should live and how I should practice my walk. But I will tell you, it is difficult because we all need to mind our own spiritual walks. And I think as Christians, it kind of is a struggle, because one of the things we are called to do as Christians is to lift one another up, to share with each other. And if we see a problem, share that with them in love. Not out of comparison, not like saying, well, you need to get where I'm at, or perhaps I should get to where you're at. But it should be an idea that I want to walk closer with God, and I want you to walk closer with God. I must consider that envy and boasting have no place to be with God in love. And it will, in fact, create conflict if I'm putting envy or boasting into that relationship. To be honest with you, I can't say that I've seen many conflicts that don't come from envy or boasting. And I would suggest to you that while they may not be the most talked about, they could be the most unhealthy. We do not have a job of correcting each other. We have a job of coming before our God and being in relationship with Him and letting the Holy Spirit direct us. And I would suggest to you that too often we want to focus on the errors of others. Proverbs 26:20-21 says, "For the lack of wood the fire goes out, and where there is no whispering, quarreling ceases. As charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so a quarrelsome man for kindling strife." I'm here to tell you, I know that verse real well, because I have been that person. You ever met a person that all you have to do is get close to them, and next thing you know, you got an argument? I've been there. Like I said, I've been that person. It's too easy in comparison to other people to find ourselves lighting the fire of conflict when perhaps a compassionate prayer quietly for that person might be a better option. Now, I'm not suggesting that conflict never needs to happen. In fact, it is in 1 Corinthians again where Paul tells people that there's sin going on in your midst, and you need to have conflict on that. You need to have confrontation. It needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed in love. And I really don't know, but we've lost our ability to confront with love. And I think, sadly, it's why we have as much conflict as we do. The next step to go along with these is that love is not arrogant or rude. Again, most of you have grown up in an age where manners were taught. In fact, they were implemented. You learned manners as a young child because your parents were not going to have rude children. And I think that's a good thing. But we're living in a world today where rudeness has almost become acceptable. And it's become acceptable because it's been rationalized. I can be rude to that person because they're so dumb. They're so wrong. I can be rude to that person because they're so bad. You see, the problem is to be rude or arrogant requires me to minimize that other person, to put them on a step a little lower than myself so that I can feel a little bit superior to them, whether that's physical, mental, or social status. And it's really hard because when you get a rude, arrogant person, they tend to feed rudeness and arrogance in you. Indeed, I have stopped many people as a police officer. I have written a ticket to the Assistant Attorney General of the state of Iowa. Believe me, I heard about that one. Boy, did I hear about that one. But occasionally I would get a very arrogant person when I stopped him and go, "Do you know who I am?" Implying that I'm so important you shouldn't be bothering me, let alone stopping me. And of course, I was a bit of an arrogant individual in my youth too. And I would always smile and go, I read their license, go, "Yes, you're so-and-so, who's receiving a citation for?" And then I'd go back and write the ticket, thinking I was taking some wind out of their sails. And I probably did. But to be honest with you, as a Christian, arrogance and rudeness will almost guarantee escalation of conflict, not decrease it. Even my response to those people, those arrogant people as a police officer, was not loving. It, like I said, was a simple way of taking the wind out of their sails. Effective in doing that, but it certainly wasn't loving. Love wants to eliminate conflict, not escalate it. It is very, very easy to be arrogant and rude. To love takes more work. Love does not demand its own way. Now, there's one that I tell you what, let's face it, we all like getting our own way. And I would suggest that most of you I've known now for at least a few months, and some of you for years, I would say most of you are not the my way or the highway kind of people. But on the same token, we do kind of like getting our way, don't we? We kind of like it when things go the way we feel they should go. And I think oftentimes we have conflict because I'm pretty sure I have the right way and you do not. What if I took a more humble approach and instead of demanding my way, I said, let's pray about this and see what God directs us? Would we have less conflict? I would suggest perhaps we have. The truth of it is, I've made this joke many times, and every time I get a strange look from the women of the church when I say it. I was a police officer back in the 70s, and back then we had no backup. So if you went into a bar fight with 15 people fighting, it was usually you by yourself. I said, I never had any fear walking into a bar of 15 guys fighting. I could handle that. But please don't put me in the church kitchen between two church ladies deciding where the glasses are supposed to go. I'm not that brave. I'm just not that brave. The truth of it is, so often when we want our way, it becomes because I'm right and you're not. I don't know about you, but I have a hard time giving up that idea that I don't have the right way always. It's of my human nature, and it's practically, unfortunately, not a good part of our human nature. 1 Corinthians 13 also goes on to say, love is not irritable or resentful. And I have the word ouch spelled in caps there. I don't think any one of us wants to admit to being irritable and resentful. But if I'm honest, I have probably been there more than I wish I was. The truth of it is, resentment is a whole lot more big in the church than it ever should have been. We get hurt over many, many things in the church. And as we see the church shrinking, we hear more and more things that are not going the way they should be. And I'm here to tell you, it oftentimes comes down to resentment and irritability. I don't want to be that person, but I find myself too often resembling that person. The truth of it is, we are not by our nature, good people. God can and will develop that in us. And we see that in people that we admire. But it's a process of weeding out some of those more base ideologies like resentment and irritability. You know, the truth of it is, some of this really hurts me to speak. I've had people say, you know, I think you're pointing fingers at me when you were preaching that sermon, Rick. And I go, no. If I was pointing a finger at you, you'd notice there are 3 fingers pointing back at me. I've never met or never spoke a sermon yet that I didn't need to hear more than anybody else in the room. And this is one for me. I definitely need this message. 1 Corinthians went on to say, love does not rejoice in wrongdoing. But we do love karma, don't we? We'd like to see people get their just desserts. And just as a side note, I hear the word karma used a lot in the church. And karma is not a Christian ideology. It is very much out of the Hindu faith. And it's involving reincarnation, which we do not believe. And yet, I hear a lot of Christians wanting to see karma. I want to see them get their just desserts. As a police officer, I saw some pretty evil things. And I will honestly tell you, there are times I enjoyed slamming the jail cell on those people. I wanted to see them go to prison, go to jail. The problem is, did that prison or jail straighten out their criminal behavior? Our desire for justice is not evil. But when we begin to celebrate wrongdoings and evil things as justification for justice, it is not good. It's not healthy. And it will lead to further conflict. The question I have to ask myself all the time when people upset me and I want to see justice done is, do I understand the grace of God and how much He forgave me? And if I do I not want them to experience that same grace? The real truth is, I desire no one faces true justice. Because true justice will come on that last day. And it will be an eternity. A very uncomfortable eternity. 1 Corinthians goes on to say, love rejoices in truth. And too often, conflict comes out of untruth. Sometimes it's an outright lie. Sometimes it's a misunderstanding. How many times have you seen just words that were misunderstood create hurt feelings and conflict? I have seen divisions that lasted for decades over a misunderstanding. You said this, and I thought you meant that, and now I'm furious. The truth of it is, truth will always reveal. And like I say, if it's a lie, lies will oftentimes be very, very destructive. When a lie is told, it's often usually with a destructive intent to tear down somebody else. It will always destroy. And I will tell you, I talked to a lot of folks that have lied in the years. I've gotten pretty good at telling when people are lying. And make no mistake, a lie will always be found out. It may take decades, it may take years, but it will be found out. And as the old saying goes, a liar never prospers. But if you're going to have conflict, There will be lies involved, I assure you. Love bears all things. Now that's a tough one, isn't it? Does it really mean all things? Yes, it does. Even when they tried to hurt me and destroy me? Yes. Even when they're unrepentant? Yes. Why should I bear such evil intent from others? And I only have one answer for you. Because God bore your evil intent. You see, I get real good at self-righteous judgment. We talked this morning a little bit about the hypocrites of Christianity. And this is where the hypocrisy of many fails. When I can sit in judgment over another human being and not realize that I have been just as evil as they have. When I cannot accept that God had to forgive me of so much, then I can stand in judgment over another. And I'm here to tell you, friends, God's grace covers a multitude of evil. But man's grace wants a little bit of a barometer where I can measure it out or withhold it. And that's not the way God set it up. Matthew 5, verses 43 through 48. You have said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain to the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brother, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. I don't know about you. That sounds almost too hard. And it did for me for a long time. Indeed, I still struggle with it. A while back, I spoke on forgiveness. And I'm here to tell you that when I was talking about forgiveness and forgiveness of my father and what he did, I did not forgive him out of the strength of my own character. It took coming to God and recognizing that I too was an enemy of God, committing sin, and that his great love, he reached out and saved me. And if God could do that for me, should I not attempt to do that for others who've wronged me? Like I said, a whole lot easier to sit up here and talk than to do. But that is going to be love. Love believes all things. Now, I'm not talking about being gullible. Indeed, if you meet somebody that knew me as a police officer, they would tell you that Baki was the guy that didn't trust anyone, didn't believe anyone. He doubted everybody. I'll be honest. I've arrested police officers, lawyers, doctors, pastors. I have arrested all types of good people. And after a while, you get to wonder if there is any good people left, because you've seen so much evil. When love says believe all things, it doesn't mean that I am gullible and accept whatever they tell me. What it means is, do I believe it's possible for anyone to be accepted by Christ and be forgiven? That's a tough one. We talked this morning about Ted Bundy a little bit. A terrible, ruthless man. To be honest with you, might be justified to say somebody should have put a bullet in his head a long time ago. I knew a man very similar to him named Sam. Sam committed his first rape when he was 13 years old. He raped a 12-year-old girl next door. He went on to rape 8 other women. The last one that I know of, that I'm aware of, that we charged him with, he tried to pluck out her eyeball so she wouldn't be able to identify him. He's a child abuser. He's a thief. He's just a basic, low-down individual. And as a police officer, I remember commenting to another police officer, the world would be a better place without people like Sam. I'm being honest with you. I felt that very true. He had caused so much pain. He had done so much evil. But as a Christian, can I look at someone like Sam and say, hopeless? No sense of trying. If I can, then I do not practice 1 Corinthians 13. It says love believes all things. Can Sam be saved? He can. To this point and this time of his life, and I haven't seen him in many years, but I understand he's still acting the criminal that he is. But do I have a burden to pray for people like him? Do I have a desire to hear and see him see Christ? The truth of it is, there's a part of me that would much rather see him disappear from the face of the earth. But that's not the loving part. The loving part says, he is a sinner in need of grace. And I, of all people who have seen grace in my own life, should be willing to give it to him. 1 Corinthians 13 goes on and says, love endures all things. No matter how big the injury, no matter how large the conflict, love endures. But I must let love endure. I must give it the opportunity to endure. If I cling to bitterness and anger, if I squeeze tightly to my onions of unforgiveness, I will not allow love to endure. You know, as I study this chapter, it occurs to me that it is almost impossible to have conflict if I apply 1 Corinthians 13. If I apply 1 Corinthians 13 to any conflict that I have, can I remain in conflict? Certainly others will bring it. But if I apply 1 Corinthians 13 to that conflict, will it quickly dissolve? You are facing conflicts, and I'm here to tell you there will be many more to come in your life. But I suggest to you that if I apply 1 Corinthians 13 to those conflicts, I don't believe they can withstand. I don't believe I can continue in conflict with an individual if I apply love to that. But that's a challenge, isn't it? It's a challenge I'd like you to put to a test. Your next conflict, apply 1 Corinthians 13 to it. Test and see whether or not conflict can resolve or whether conflict can continue. Because, my friends, I don't think it can. That's my message for today. Thank you.